My name is William Bill Lenton, and I was a firefighter paramedic in Santa Barbara County for over 20 years. If you'd asked me what mattered most, I'd have said duty, precision, survival. I didn't believe in miracles, just training, adrenaline, and seconds that decide life or death. I grew up in Ventura, in a house where God was mentioned exactly twice a year, Christmas and Easter. My father was a construction foreman who believed in overtime and beer. My mother went to Mass sometimes, mostly out of habit, I think. She'd come home and make coffee, never talking about what she heard. When I was 12, I asked her if she really believed all that stuff about heaven and hell. She looked tired. "I don't know, Billy," she said. "I hope so." That was the last theological conversation we ever had. By the time I joined the fire academy at 23, I'd built my own creed. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Show me evidence. Show me data. The universe was mechanics, not magic. People lived, people died, and what happened after was exactly nothing. Lights out, game over. I'd seen enough bodies, car wrecks, heart attacks, drownings, to know that death wasn't peaceful or poetic. It was just the end of electrical activity. I was good at the job, really good. I could intubate in the back of a moving rig, talk down a suicide jumper, carry a 200-pound man out of a burning structure without breaking stride. My crew trusted me. My captains promoted me. I collected commendations the way some guys collect baseball cards. On my office wall at Station 27, there were plaques and photos. Me shaking hands with the county supervisor, me at a burn unit ribbon cutting, me teaching CPR to high school kids who looked bored and invincible. Laura and I got married when I was 26. She was a pediatric nurse, calm, competent, prettier than I deserved. We had 2 kids, Jenny, who became a teacher in Sacramento, and Michael, who went into software and moved to Austin. Good kids, solid. We did the beach barbecues, the little league games, the college move-in days. I was present but not really there, if you know what I mean. I loved them in the way you're supposed to love your family, but something in me was locked. I couldn't name it, couldn't fix it, Laura noticed. Of course she did. After about 15 years of marriage, she started asking questions I didn't want to answer. "Do you ever feel anything, Bill?" she asked once, after I'd come home from a particularly bad call, a 4-year-old who didn't make it. I was in the kitchen, drinking a beer, scrolling through my phone. "I feel tired," I said. She stared at me. "That's not what I mean." I knew what she meant, but I didn't know how to give her what she wanted. I worked 50-hour weeks, sometimes 60, picked up overtime shifts, told myself it was about the mortgage, college tuition, retirement. Really, it was because work made sense. Emergencies had protocols. Problems had solutions. You followed the algorithm and people lived or they didn't, and either way, you moved on to the next call. Home was harder. Home required something I didn't have. The guys at the station joked that I was a robot. "Lenton doesn't bleed," they'd say. "He's got transmission fluid." I laughed along with them. It was easier than admitting they were right. At 52, I was in the best shape of my life. I ran 5 miles every morning before my shift, lifted weights 3 times a week, ate clean. My resting heart rate was 58. My cholesterol was perfect. I was a machine, and I maintained myself like one. I told Laura it was about staying ready for the job. She said I was running from something. "What am I running from?" I asked. She just shook her head. "I don't know, but you've been running for 30 years. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been running since I was 12 years old, since the night my mother told me she hoped there was a heaven but didn't know for sure. I decided then that hope was dangerous, that certainty was survival. I built my life on concrete facts: muscle, bone, cardiac output, cellular respiration. Everything else was noise. When Laura asked once if I ever thought about what happens after death, I laughed. "I've seen enough of it," I said. "It's just lights out." I believed that, or wanted to, because if there was something more, something beyond the meat and electricity, then I'd wasted decades ignoring the only question that mattered. But I didn't think about that. I couldn't afford to. I had a pension to build, a routine to maintain, a reputation to protect. I was William Lenton, dependable, decorated, respected. I saved lives. I didn't ask cosmic questions. Inside, though, there was something else. A quiet voice I'd spent 52 years drowning out. Late at night, after Laura fell asleep, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the ocean a quarter mile away, and wonder, is this it? Is this all there is? The question scared me more than any fire ever had, so I didn't answer it. I just got up the next morning and ran another 5 miles. That was my life. Ordinary, controlled, empty in ways I couldn't admit. And then everything changed. It was the winter of 2016. A flu epidemic had hit hard, the worst respiratory season Santa Barbara County had seen in years. We were running nonstop calls, 20-hour shifts, no sleep. My crew was exhausted. I was functioning on black coffee and muscle memory. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. Elderly female, severe respiratory distress, apartment complex off Milpa Street. When we arrived, she was in her 70s, alone, gasping like a fish on a dock. Her lips were cyanotic. Oxygen saturation was in the low 80s. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Influenza-induced pneumonia, bilateral lung involvement, probable sepsis. I climbed across her bed to get the oxygen mask positioned properly. She was too weak to hold it herself. As I leaned in, adjusting the straps, she exhaled hard, a desperate, rattling breath straight into my face. I inhaled at exactly the wrong moment. I felt the warm, sick air go deep into my lungs. "God damn it," I muttered, but there was no time to think about it. We had to move. She died en route to Cottage Hospital. I did compressions the whole way, even though I knew it was futile. Her lungs were too compromised. When we called it in the ER, I stripped off my gloves, washed my hands, and went back to the station. Another call was already waiting. 2 days later, I woke up with a headache that felt like my skull was cracking open. By noon, I had a fever of 103. Laura wanted me to go to the hospital. I refused. "It's just the flu," I said. "I'll sleep it off." But by the 4th day, I couldn't get out of bed. My skin was burning. My chest felt like someone had poured concrete into it. Every breath was work. Laura called 911. I was too weak to argue. When the paramedics arrived, guys from my own department, I saw the look in their eyes. They tried to hide it, but I knew that look. I'd worn it myself 100 times. It's the look you give someone when you're not sure they're going to make it. They got me onto the gurney. Oxygen mask. 2 large-bore IVs. I remember thinking, with a weird kind of detachment, so this is what it's like on this side. I'd spent 20 years doing this to other people. Now I was the teaching case. In the rig, I could hear my own vitals on the monitor. Heart rate 142, blood pressure 88/54, respiratory rate 32, all bad numbers. I tried to focus on the ceiling of the ambulance, but my vision kept narrowing. The edges were going gray. At the hospital, they moved fast. ER attending, 2 nurses, respiratory therapist. Someone started morphine for the pain and nausea. My whole body felt like it was being crushed from the inside. I heard fragments of conversation. Severe dehydration, septic shock, multi-organ involvement. Then a voice, sharper. BP dropping, 70/40. I felt it happening, my body shutting down, system by system. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't like the movies, it was just a slow, gray fade, like someone turning down the volume on the world. Laura was there suddenly, gripping my hand. Her face was close to mine. "Bill, stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay?" I wanted to answer, but my tongue felt thick and useless. I tried to squeeze her hand back. I'm not sure if I did. Another voice. 40/0. I'm barely getting anything. The monitor's beeping slowed. I knew what that meant. I'd heard it too many times. Bradycardia, the heart giving up. I thought, absurdly, this isn't how it's supposed to go. I'm the one who saves people. But there was no saving this. I could feel my pulse getting weaker, more erratic. My vision was almost gone now. Just a small circle of light in the center, like looking through a tunnel. Everything else was dark. Someone shouted, "No pulse! Starting compressions!" I felt the first compression hit my chest, but it was distant, like it was happening to someone else. The pain was fading. Everything was fading. Then I heard it. The long, flat tone. The sound every medic knows too well. The sound that means it's over. My last thought was surprisingly calm. So this is it. This is what it feels like to die. And then there was nothing. The instant the flat line sounded, the noise stopped. Not gradually, not like sound fading into the distance. It just stopped. The alarms, the shouting, The chaos of the code blue team descending on my body, all of it went silent, as if someone had hit a mute button on the entire universe. And I was still there. I was standing beside the gurney, maybe 3 feet away, watching. There was my body, pale, motionless, chest compressions making it jerk like a broken puppet. Laura was pressed against the wall, her hand over her mouth. A nurse was drawing up epinephrine. The attending physician was barking orders I couldn't hear, but I wasn't in that body anymore. I looked down at myself, not at the body on the gurney, but at me, the part that was standing there observing. I had hands, arms, a sense of form. But when I tried to touch the gurney's metal rail, my hand passed through it like smoke through a screen door. No resistance, no sensation, just movement through matter that no longer mattered. I should have been terrified. Every instinct I developed over 52 years of life should have been screaming. But I felt nothing like fear. It was more like relief, like stepping out of a burning building into cool night air, like taking off boots that had been too tight for decades. I looked at Laura, tried to reach for her. "I'm right here," I said, or thought I said. My mouth didn't move because I didn't have a mouth, not really, but the intention was there, the meaning, the attempt to communicate. She didn't hear me. She just stared at my body, tears streaming down her face. And then I felt it, a pull. Not physical, not like gravity, more like an invitation, a gentle tugging at the center of what I was, pulling me upward and backward simultaneously, as if up and away were the same direction. The walls of the trauma bay started to dissolve, not crumbling or fading, dissolving, like watercolor paint running in the rain. The ceiling became translucent, then transparent, then simply wasn't there anymore. I was moving, but not walking, rising, but not flying. It was movement without motion, travel without distance. The hospital fell away beneath me, first the ER, then the whole building, then the parking lot and the streetlights and the dark Pacific beyond. I watched it all shrink to a pinpoint, and still I felt no fear. Just a kind of peaceful curiosity, like a child watching a butterfly. And then the world itself began to change. Space, or whatever I was moving through, started to shimmer. At first I thought it was just darkness, the absence of light. But as my perception adjusted, I realized it wasn't dark at all. It was full of color. Not the colors I'd known all my life, but something deeper, richer, more there. Deep golds that seemed to pulse with warmth. Violets that hummed with a frequency I could feel in my chest. Except I didn't have a chest anymore, did I? Blues that were somehow ancient and newborn at the same time. The colors moved like music. No, they were music. Each hue had a tone, a vibration, a voice, and together they formed something that wasn't quite a symphony and wasn't quite a language, but contained both. I could feel it resonating through me, or as me, because the boundary between the music and myself was dissolving too. The air, if it was air, was alive. It had texture, density, emotion. It pressed against me gently, like a warm tide, and I knew somehow that it was aware. Not conscious in the way a person is conscious, but aware the way a forest is aware, or an ocean. Present, attentive, welcoming. Time stopped making sense. I'd been moving for seconds, or minutes, or years. There was no way to tell. The part of my brain that tracked duration, that measured life in shifts and schedules and alarm clocks was gone. What remained was just nowness, an eternal present that somehow contained all moments at once. And then I felt it, not heard it, not saw it, but felt it, deeper than thought, deeper than instinct. Welcome home. No words, no voice. Just understanding, pure and total, arriving in my mind like something that had always been there and was only now being remembered. Not welcome to home, but welcome home, as if this place, this state, this indescribable brightness was where I'd always belonged, and my entire life had been a temporary assignment, a brief excursion into heaviness and forgetting. I wanted to weep, but I had no tears. I wanted to laugh, but I had no breath. So I just released. Released the tension I'd been carrying since I was 12 years old. Released the cynicism, the control, the carefully constructed armor of competence and skepticism. released the belief that the universe was mechanical and meaningless, that death was just lights out, that love was a chemical reaction and nothing more. For the first time in decades, maybe for the first time ever, I wasn't saving anyone. I wasn't in charge. I wasn't maintaining control or running toward danger or building walls to keep feeling out. I was being saved. The colors intensified, and I realized I was accelerating, moving deeper into this luminous expanse. The last threads connecting me to my body, to the hospital, to everything I'd called life, were dissolving like morning mist. I didn't fight it. I didn't even question it. I just let go, and the light grew brighter. The motion stopped, and I found myself standing, not on ground, exactly, but standing nonetheless, with a sense of surface beneath me that felt solid and insubstantial at the same time. I looked down and saw what appeared to be a vast, open plain stretching to every horizon. But instead of grass or earth, it was made of light, golden, flowing, endless. Each blade, each particle, shimmered with its own luminescence, breathing with something that felt unmistakably like joy. The colors I'd seen while traveling intensified here. They weren't just surrounding me, they were emanating from everything, including whatever form I now occupied. I looked at my hands and saw them glowing softly, translucent but present, like skin made of dawn light. The silence here was different from the silence of the hospital. This wasn't absence, it was fullness. A quiet so complete it contained every sound that had ever been made, held in perfect balance. Then, shapes began to appear in the distance. At first, they were just suggestions, forms coalescing out of the ambient light. But as they drew closer, they became more defined, human-shaped, but made entirely of energy, of living radiance. One of them approached, and even before I could see the features clearly, I knew who it was. Frank Cordova, my old partner, dead 10 years in a warehouse fire off State Street, trying to reach a homeless man who'd fallen asleep too close to a space heater. We'd pulled Frank's body out 4 hours later. I'd carried his turnout coat at the funeral. But here he was, or whatever remained of him, whatever he truly was. The light that formed his face smiled, or the energy that composed him expressed what I could only interpret as a smile. There was no grief in him, no pain, no trace of the burns that had killed him. Just presence. Just Frank. Jesus, Frank, I whispered, or tried to. I still wasn't sure if I was speaking or just thinking. He didn't answer with words, but I felt his response, clear as a bell. Hey, Billy, took you long enough. And then I saw others, dozens, hundreds, emerging from the luminous landscape like memories taking form. People I'd rescued over the years. The teenager I'd pulled from a rollover on the 101, the elderly man I'd defibrillated in a grocery store parking lot, the woman in anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. They were here, not all of them. Maybe some were still alive, I didn't know, but many, and behind them, others. Faces I remembered for different reasons, the ones I couldn't save, the child in cardiac arrest, the suicide I'd arrived too late for, the man who died in my arms from a gunshot wound, whispering his daughter's name. They were here too, not haunting me, greeting me. One by one they acknowledged me, not with words, but with waves of recognition, gratitude, understanding. Some I'd known for seconds before they died. Others had lived because of my interventions and gone on to have families, careers, decades of life. But here, on this plane, there was no difference between the ones who lived and the ones who died. They were all complete, whole, themselves in a way that physical life had only approximated. I felt my knees weaken. I knelt down, or the intention to kneel caused my form to lower, and placed my hand on the surface beneath me. The moment I made contact, light rippled outward in concentric waves, like touching the surface of a perfectly still lake. The ripples expanded, and in each expanding ring, I saw experiences. Moments from my life as a paramedic, every call I'd ever run, every scream, every broken bone, every cardiac arrest, every moment of terror and hope and desperate improvisation. It poured through me, not as memory, but as living experience happening all at once. 20 years of emergency medicine compressed into a single, eternal now. And as I watched, as I felt it all again, I understood something I'd never grasped before. Every act of rescue, every moment of service, wasn't about saving bodies. It was about remembering souls. It was about seeing the divine spark in another person and saying, through action, you matter. Your life has meaning. You are worth saving. Even when I hadn't believed in souls. Even when I'd thought consciousness was just electrical activity and death was just lights out. I had been acting on a truth deeper than my beliefs. I had been practicing love without calling it love. I had been serving something sacred without acknowledging the sacred. I started to weep, or whatever passed for weeping in this form. Not from sadness, from recognition, from the overwhelming weight of understanding that I'd been so wrong about everything, and yet somehow, in being wrong, I'd still stumbled towards something true. Then I felt it. A presence. Not arriving, because it had been there all along, but revealing itself. The way your eyes adjust to a dark room and you realize you were never alone. It surrounded everything. It was everything. The light, the landscape, the figures, the very substance of this place. But it was also distinct, aware, focused. It had attention, and that attention was now directed at me with a gentleness so profound it broke me open. There was no figure, no face, no bearded man on a throne or glowing angel with wings, just warmth. Infinite, all-encompassing warmth that somehow contained every good thing I'd ever felt, every moment of love, every act of kindness, every second of genuine connection I'd experienced in 52 years of life, magnified beyond measure. It spoke without speaking. The communication arrived in my consciousness as pure understanding, bypassing language entirely. Welcome home, William. I couldn't respond. I was too shattered, too opened, too undone by the sheer force of unconditional acceptance pouring through me. The presence continued, and each transmission felt like drinking light. You came to learn that saving others begins with remembering love. Images flooded through me, not my memories, but something deeper. I saw my own life from a different angle. Every moment I'd been closed off, every time I'd chosen duty over feeling, every instance I'd turned away from vulnerability. But there was no judgment in the showing. Only compassion, only understanding. I saw Laura trying for years to reach me. I saw my children looking up at a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. I saw the men at the firehouse making jokes about me being a robot, and I saw the hurt beneath my laughter. And I saw something else. I saw how much I'd been loved, even when I couldn't feel it. How Laura had stayed, how my kids had kept calling, how Frank and the crew had trusted me with their lives. Not because I was perfect, but because I showed up. How even my inability to feel hadn't stopped me from acting with care. You believed you had to be strong. You believed feeling was weakness. You believed you were alone. The voice, if it could be called a voice, was impossibly tender. But you were never alone. And love was never something you had to earn or deserve. Love is what you are. It's what everything is. You simply forgot. I felt something breaking in me. Not breaking apart, but breaking open. Like a seed cracking to let the shoot emerge. All the armor, all the control, all the carefully constructed walls I'd built since I was 12 years old. They were dissolving, and I was terrified and relieved in equal measure. I don't know how, I said, or thought, or transmitted. I don't know how to be that. You already are. You always have been. Watch. And then I saw my life again, but differently. Every act of service, every IV started, every airway secured, every hand held in an ambulance, shown not as technical competence, but as love in action. Imperfect love, unconscious love, love that didn't know its own name, but love nonetheless. I saw the 4-year-old who died, the one I'd come home from and felt nothing. I saw her now, here, in this place, whole and radiant, and I understood that my inability to save her hadn't diminished her. She had simply transitioned, and my grief, buried so deep I'd convinced myself it didn't exist, was just love with nowhere to go. Every life you touched with love, even when you didn't feel it. Especially then, the presence wrapped around me, through me, became indistinguishable from me, and in that merger, I experienced something I'd spent my entire life avoiding. Total vulnerability, total exposure, total acceptance. I wanted to stay there forever. The peace was overwhelming, the beauty unbearable in its intensity. I wanted to dissolve completely into this light, into this love, into this understanding that rendered every question I'd ever asked meaningless. But even as I surrendered to it, I felt something shift. The light began to dim slightly at the edges of my perception. Not fading, but receding, as if making room for something else. I turned or directed my attention, since turning and looking weren't quite the same thing here, and saw it on the horizon, a heavy gray mist creeping in. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it was dense, opaque, pulling against the luminous clarity of this place, and somehow I knew what it was. It was everything I'd left behind, the weight of physical existence, the gravity of unfinished business, the call of a life not yet complete. The present spoke once more, and this time there was a question in it. Do you want to stay, or do you want to return? Within that gray mist, shapes began to form, not luminous like the beings I'd just encountered, but solid, familiar, achingly real. I recognized them immediately, scenes from my own life, but these weren't the moments I would have chosen to revisit. I saw myself at the kitchen table 3 years ago, Laura across from me, trying to talk about something. I couldn't even remember what now, her mouth moving, her eyes searching my face for connection, and me, scrolling through my phone, half listening, offering mechanical responses. Yeah, sure. I watched her face fall, watched her give up mid-sentence and walk away, watched myself not even notice. The scene shifted. The fire station. A young rookie, maybe 24, his first month on the job. He'd missed a step in the equipment check, and I'd torn into him in front of the whole crew. You trying to get someone killed? I'd said. You think this is a game? I watched his face flush red, watched his hands shake as he rechecked everything twice, 3 times, watched him avoid eye contact with me for weeks afterward. Another memory. An elderly man on a gurney, gray and still. I'd checked for a pulse, found nothing, glanced at my watch, and called time of death. 16 seconds total. I'd filled out the paperwork in the rig, eating a sandwich, already thinking about the next call. I'd never asked his name, never wondered who he'd been, never considered that someone, somewhere, was about to receive the worst news of their life. The scenes kept coming, relentless. Every time I'd chosen distance over presence. Every harsh word delivered without thought. Every moment of emotional absence disguised as professional competence. Every person I'd treated as a problem to solve rather than a soul to acknowledge. And then something shifted. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was feeling. Suddenly, I was Laura at that kitchen table, feeling the loneliness of sitting across from someone who was physically there but emotionally gone. The slow erosion of hope that things might change. The quiet heartbreak of being unseen by the person you love most. Then I was the rookie, feeling the shame burn through me, the fear that I was incompetent, the desperate need to prove myself, the way one moment of public humiliation could poison months of work, the way authority wielded carelessly could crush confidence that took years to build. Then I was someone standing in a hospital corridor, being told their father had died, feeling the world tilt sideways, wanting to know, did he suffer? Was he alone? Did anyone care? And getting only clinical answers, timestamps, procedure codes, being treated like an interruption in someone else's busy day. Each experience hit me like a wave, not as abstract understanding, but as lived reality. I felt it all, the fear, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of being treated as less than human, the cumulative weight of 1,000 small abandonments. I fell to my knees in that field of light, or whatever passed for kneeling in this form, and I cried, really cried, for the first time in decades. Not the controlled grief I'd allowed myself at funerals, not the brief mist in my eyes I'd dismissed as exhaustion, but deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere older than my 52 years. I didn't know, I said to no one and everyone. I didn't know I was doing that. I thought I was just getting through it, surviving, doing my job. The presence drew closer. I felt it like warmth moving through cold water, like light penetrating shadow, and in its approach, there was no anger, no disappointment, only a compassion so vast it made my own self-judgment seem small and irrelevant. There is no punishment here, William, only understanding. The voice, the transmission, was impossibly gentle. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. You spent a lifetime protecting yourself from pain, but in doing so, you also protected yourself from connection, from love, from the very thing you came to Earth to experience. I failed, I said. I failed everyone. Number. You learned. That's what physical life is for, learning through experience, even painful experience, especially painful experience. The gray mist began to shift and new scenes appeared, the people I had saved over the years. But these weren't triumphant moments. These were the ones that had haunted me, the ones I'd saved only for them to die later. The teenager from the car accident, walking again after 6 months of physical therapy, only to die from an overdose 2 years later. The man I'd defibrillated in the grocery store parking lot, who'd gone on to live another 5 years before cancer took him. The woman with the bee sting, who'd survived only to die in her sleep from an undiagnosed heart condition. In my old worldview, these had been failures, temporary victories that death had ultimately won. What was the point of saving someone if they were just going to die anyway? But here, now I saw them differently. They appeared before me, not as the broken bodies I'd encountered, but as whole beings, radiant with light. And from each of them, I felt not accusation, but gratitude, even joy. And the teenager approached first. His light pulsed with a frequency I understood as laughter. Those 2 extra years mattered, Bill. I got to reconcile with my mom. I got to tell my little sister I was proud of her. I got to feel the ocean one more time. You gave me that. The man from the grocery store. 5 more years with my grandkids. 5 more Christmases. 5 more chances to say I love you. None of that was wasted. The woman. I had 3 more months. I finished my book. I made peace with my ex-husband. I watched my garden bloom one last time. Every moment was a gift. One by one, they showed me. Nothing was wasted. Every breath of care continued. Every act of love echoed beyond the moment of action, rippling outward in ways I'd never seen, never imagined. Even the 4-year-old who died in my arms, she was there, whole and luminous. And from her I felt a simple message. You held me. I wasn't alone. That mattered. The field of light pulsed brighter, and I felt the presence everywhere now, in everything, speaking through the very substance of this place. Time is an illusion of physical reality. From here, we see it all at once. Every moment you gave someone happens eternally. Every moment of genuine care creates a thread of light that connects you to that soul forever. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Love is the only thing that's real, and love never ends. I looked at my hands, or whatever corresponded to hands here, and saw threads of light extending from them, thousands of them, connecting me to every person I'd ever touched, helped, or served. Even the ones I'd saved imperfectly. Even the ones who died anyway. The threads glowed, pulsed, vibrated with life, and I understood. All that mattered was connection. Every rescue was never about the fire, the accident, the medical emergency. It was about the love underneath it, the implicit message in every act of service. You are not alone. You matter. I see you. Even when I hadn't consciously felt love, I had acted from it. Even when I'd told myself I was just doing a job, I had been practicing something sacred. You learned to serve before you learned to feel, the presence said. Now you have the opportunity to do both. What do you mean? You can stay here, William. You've earned rest. You've completed your learning. No one would fault you for remaining. The light around me intensified, inviting, warm, beyond description. Everything in me wanted to say yes, wanted to dissolve into this peace and never return to the weight, the pain, the limited perception of physical existence. Or, the presence continued, you can go back. Return to your body, return to your life. But if you go back changed. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unfeel what you have felt. Images appeared in the mist. Laura, sitting in the hospital waiting room, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. My daughter Jenny, driving through the night from Sacramento, crying as she drove. My son Michael, on a plane from Austin, staring out the window, remembering all the times he'd wanted to talk to me and I'd been too busy. They needed me. Not the old me, the closed-off, controlled, emotionally absent me, but a version of me that could actually show up, actually be present, actually love openly instead of protecting myself from feeling. The choice is yours, the presence said. There is no wrong answer, only what your soul needs next. I looked at the threads of light extending from me, connecting me to everyone I'd touched. Then I looked at the gray mist, where the faces of my family waited, and I knew. I want to go back, I said. I want to try again. I want to love them while I still can. The presence pulsed with something that felt like pride, or approval, or perhaps just recognition. Then remember, William, you are not returning to fix anything. You are returning to experience it fully, to feel it all, to be present for the joy and the pain, the connection and the loss. That is what it means to be human. That is what makes life sacred. The light began to fade at the edges. The field, the beings, Frank and the others, all of it started to recede, but not before I felt one final transmission. We will always be here, and you will always be loved. Then the gray mist rushed forward, and I felt myself being pulled backward, downward, into something heavy and dense and terrifyingly familiar. I was returning to my body, and this time I was bringing everything I'd learned with me. The light began to dim, not all at once, but gradually, like a sunset in reverse. The field, the beings, the infinite warmth, all of it started to pull away, or perhaps I was the one being pulled. The presence spoke one last time, and its voice carried both finality and promise. You have more to learn. Go back and live what you've seen. No, I said, and I meant it. Please, don't send me back there. Let me stay. I can't go back to being that. I can't unknow this. But even as I spoke, I felt the weight returning. Gravity, density, the terrible heaviness of having a body, of being bound by time and space and limitation. The mist thickened around me, gray and cold, and I was falling, not down exactly, but backward, inward, into something small and confined and suffocating. Back through sound, the flatline tone returning, then fragmenting into voices, alarms, the controlled chaos of a code blue. Back through weight, my chest compressed, ribs cracking slightly from CPR. Back through pain. God. The pain, like being crushed and burned and frozen all at once. And then I gasped. My lungs filled with air, thick, heavy, nothing like the luminous atmosphere I'd just left. My chest heaved. The pain was spectacular, radiating from my sternum outward. I heard the monitor beeping erratically, then finding a rhythm. Voices shouting, hands on me, checking, adjusting, stabilizing. I forced my eyes open. The fluorescent lights of the ER were blindingly harsh after the soft gold of that field. Everything was too bright, too loud, too much. A nurse leaned over me, her face wet with tears. "Welcome back," she said, half laughing, half sobbing. "You were gone for 2 minutes." 2 minutes. I'd been gone for what felt like hours, days, a lifetime. I'd traveled through dimensions, spoken with the dead, encountered something infinite. And here, in this reality, only 2 minutes had passed. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the intubation tube they'd just removed. The words came out as a whisper. I saw them. They're all okay. The nurse squeezed my hand. "Who, sweetie?" "Who's okay?" "Everyone," I said. "Everyone we lost. They're home." She smiled the way medical professionals smile when patients say strange things after trauma. Gentle, non-committal, already thinking about the next task. But I didn't care if she believed me. I knew what I'd seen. Laura was there within minutes, brought in from the waiting room. She gripped both my hands, crying so hard she couldn't speak. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw every line on her face, every gray hair, every year she'd spent trying to reach me, and I felt it all. Her love, her fear, her exhaustion, her relief. I didn't push it away. I let it in. "I'm sorry," I said. The words felt inadequate, but they were a start. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm here now, I promise." She nodded, unable to answer, and held my hand to her cheek. The recovery was brutal. Septic shock had done serious damage, Kidney injury, cardiac strain, weeks of intravenous antibiotics and physical therapy. Every breath hurt, every movement was effort, and the whole time I kept remembering the lightness, the peace, the absence of pain. Part of me resented being back in this broken, failing body, but another part, the part that had been changed, understood why I'd returned. Weeks later, I went back to the station for a visit. I wasn't cleared for duty yet, might never be fully cleared again. The guys were glad to see me, slapping my back, making jokes about me being too stubborn to die. We sat around the apparatus bay, drinking coffee, talking about calls, but everything looked different to me now. The trucks, the gear, the routine I'd lived for 20 years, it all seemed smaller somehow. Not less important, just not the whole story. I'd spent 2 decades thinking the fire was what mattered, that the rescue was the point. But now I understood. The fire was just the context. The rescue was just the vehicle. What mattered was the connection underneath it all. I started doing something I'd never done before. I began visiting families we'd served over the years, not in any official capacity, just as a person checking in. The parents of the teenager we'd pulled from the rollover, the daughter of the man who died from the gunshot wound, the sister of the suicide I'd arrived too late for. I'd knock on their doors, introduce myself, and ask if they wanted to talk. Some said no, and I respected that, but many said yes. And we'd sit, in living rooms, on porches, at kitchen tables, and they'd tell me about the people they'd lost, not the medical details, not the trauma, but the real stuff, what their loved one had been like, what they'd loved, what they'd feared, what they'd meant. And I'd listen, really listen. Not as a firefighter analyzing a situation, but as a human being witnessing another human being's grief. Sometimes they cried, sometimes I cried with them, and always, before I left, I'd tell them, they're okay. I don't know how I know, but I know they're okay. I retired early. My body couldn't handle the physical demands anymore, and honestly, my heart wasn't in it the same way. I'd spent 20 years running toward emergencies. Now I wanted to sit still, to be present, to feel things instead of pushing them away. I started volunteering at a hospice center downtown. 3 days a week, I'd sit with dying patients, many of them alone, their families unable or unwilling to be there. I'd hold their hands, read to them, sometimes just sit in silence, being a presence so they didn't have to face the end alone. And sometimes, when I could tell they were close, when I saw that particular look in their eyes, the fear, the uncertainty, I'd lean in close and whisper, "You're not going anywhere scary. You're just going home. There's light there. There's love. Everyone you've lost is waiting." I don't know if it helped, but I said it anyway, because I'd been there. I'd seen it. And if my experience could ease someone's fear in their final moments, then coming back had been worth it. Laura and I started over in a way. Not a fresh start, we couldn't erase 30 years of distance, but a conscious rebuild. I told her everything about what I'd experienced, every detail I could remember. She listened, skeptical, but open. "I don't know if I believe all of it," she said, "but I believe it changed you, and I'm grateful for that." We began doing small things together. Morning walks on the beach, cooking dinner side by side, sitting on the porch in the evenings, not talking, just being together. It felt awkward at first. I'd spent so long being emotionally unavailable that vulnerability felt like walking on a broken ankle. But I kept at it, kept showing up, kept trying to be present. My kids noticed too. Jenny drove down from Sacramento more often, and we'd have real conversations, not the surface-level updates about work and weather, but actual talks about life, meaning, struggle. Michael called weekly instead of monthly, and we started a tradition of video calls where we'd just hang out, him showing me around Austin, me showing him whatever project I was working on. I wasn't perfect at any of it. Old habits died hard. Sometimes I'd catch myself retreating, closing off, reaching for the phone to avoid feeling something. But now I noticed when I did it, and I could choose differently. That was the gift, not perfection, but awareness. Not immunity from pain, but the willingness to feel it. People ask me sometimes if I still believe in heaven. It's a complicated question. I tell them I don't think heaven is a place you go to, at least not the way we usually imagine it. I think it's a frequency, a state of being, a field of consciousness made of every act of love we've ever given or received, and I don't think you have to die to experience it. Sometimes, on quiet mornings when the light hits the ocean just right, or when I'm holding the hand of a hospice patient and I see the fear leave their eyes, or when Laura laughs at something stupid I've said, in those moments I'm back in that field, just for a second, just enough to remember. The hard part isn't believing in the light. The hard part is staying awake to it while you're here, in the weight and the pain and the mundane grind of being human. The hard part is remembering that this life, this body, this moment, it all matters. It's all sacred. It's all part of the same vast, luminous love that I encountered when my heart stopped beating. I'm 61 now. My health isn't great. The septic shock did permanent damage, and the doctors say I probably have another decade if I'm lucky. But I'm not afraid, not anymore. When I die again, and I will, someday, I hope I wake up in that golden field, with Frank and the others, with the faces I saved and the faces I couldn't save, with my parents, who died years ago, and with Laura and the kids, when their time comes. Because now I know something I didn't know before. No one really dies in the fire. We just learn what light truly means. We just go home. And in the meantime, in whatever time I have left, I'm trying to live like someone who remembers. Someone who knows that every moment of connection, every act of service, every time we choose presence over protection, we're creating threads of light that stretches into eternity. I don't tell people they have to believe what I believe. I just tell them to pay attention, to be present, to love while they can, because that's the only thing that comes with us when we leave. That's the only thing that's real. The rest is just noise, beautiful, painful, necessary noise, but noise nonetheless. And someday, when the noise finally stops, there will be light, there will be home, there will be love. I've already been there once, and I'm not afraid to go back.